Mosaic, a daily news program from Link TV, presents a selection of news reports from independent and state-controlled broadcasters from throughout the Middle East.
As
the vote counting continues in Iraq, the Independent Higher Electoral Commission estimated the number of Iraqis who voted at 3 million, 60% of the registered voters. Meanwhile, the American occupation forces announced that 3 Marines were killed and 2 others were injured in Babel province, south of Baghdad. The British Defense Ministry said that 10 military personnel were killed when their plane crashed yesterday, 9 of whom were from the Royal Air Force. We leave you with our reporter from Baghdad, Zayed al-Najjad. Quietness is widespread in Baghdad and most of Iraq's provinces, indicating that normal life is returning to a country that has been torn apart by chaos and security breakdown. Amidst these conditions, the head of the Independent Higher Electoral Commission said that initial voting count has started and added that the counting will continue throughout the day. The religious clerk, Grand Ayatollah Ali Sistani, thanks the Iraqi people for their participation in the elections and refuted the possibility of a civil war, explaining that he was misunderstood when he talked about this issue earlier. Initial counting revealed that the Iraqi National Alliance is ahead in the southern Iraqi cities, while the Iraqi list led by the Prime Minister is ahead in the green zone. Dawood Pakistani, who is in charge of the human rights organization, accused the Iraqi Prime Minister of using his position to transport voting booths from Senegal to villages in northern Iraq, denying people of their right to vote. Today, Iraqi Prime Minister announced the arrest of 7 people from different nationalities that were trying to attack voting centers yesterday. In a press conference, the Iraqi Minister of Interior said that the election process was good and that the Iraqis were able to participate in them. He explained that Iraq was subjected to 91 attacks, including 33 attacks that targeted election centers. He announced that armed men from different nationalities were arrested and added that his ministry will not hesitate in publicizing the results of the investigation, including the nationality of the perpetrators. Meanwhile, the occupation forces announced that 3 American soldiers were killed in southern Baghdad, but refrained from mentioning further details. The Iraqi 20th Revolution Brigades claimed responsibility for attacking the British plane yesterday in a video that was published on the internet. The British Defense Ministry acknowledged that 10 of its military personnel were killed in the incident. Ziyad al-Najjad, Syrian Arab Television, Baghdad.
Elections in Iraq ended yesterday, and today there is a preliminary count of the ballots. Reactions to the election in the capital, Baghdad, varied. Some people were happy, and others objected to holding the election under occupation.
24 hours after the polling stations have closed, and the situation in Baghdad is relatively the same. Today is the last day of the national holiday declared by the interim government. However, the mobility of vehicles and pedestrians continues to be restricted. The Iraqis had a political view and an emotional reaction to the election now that it has become a reality. They described it as a historical event, adding that this election did not provide the majority of citizens the opportunity to remain neutral.
I hope the election would be a positive thing, and that would benefit the people. We hope it would produce tangible results. Yesterday's election was excellent. If it proves anything, then it proves that these great people are not being deterred by the terrorists or the people who are envious of our country. We are very happy, and I predict that in the near future, Iraq and its people will be in good situation. We did not vote in the election because it is not clean. The elections were decreed by the occupation forces. According to the international law, any rules issued by the occupying forces are invalid.
The counting of the ballots occurred in secrecy and away from the photographer's lenses at a location near this center inside the Green Zone. The Independent Iraqi High Election Commission and the multinational forces chose this area to collect the voting boxes, which were transported by air. They believe that the Green Zone is the most secure area in Iraq, despite that it is always being attacked by missiles. The election results have not been announced yet, but security measures have intensified, and there is a high level of public optimism. These were two of the defining points of the situation in Iraq, only one day after the election. Hassan Sari, Abu Dhabi TV, from inside the conference center, Baghdad.
An Iraqi woman named her newborn daughter Elections, since she was born on the day of the elections. Meanwhile, a day after the elections, Iraqis have mixed feelings of happiness and sadness for those who lost their loved ones during the elections. Her screams are crying out for freedom after she was born on the same day of the Iraqi elections. Because of her mother's enthusiasm over Iraqis heading to their first election in nearly half a century, her mother named her daughter Elections.
We named her Elections because she came at the same time as the Iraqi elections. God willing that God will make us victorious over the oppressors and keep them away and return our security and peace.
Ordinary people on the street who were enthusiastic about the elections that took place yesterday have mixed responses about them due to the bloody operations that took place.
I'm happy because elections were not like previous ones, where there were only two choices, yes or no. In reality, this time there are truly free elections.
These elections can be considered a new step for a new independent Iraq and closer to a better Iraq for all Iraqis.
These elections will help implement justice and freedom, and people can know what the future holds.
Others expressed their happiness that the election day ended by dancing, including in the Kurdish areas. However, feelings were different by other happy voters who were met with the loss that they had to bear on the day of the elections. A day like no other in Iraq, but that carries so much weight for the days to come. The process of counting votes by Iraqis living around the world began. In Damascus, surveys indicate that nearly 90% of Iraqis that registered in Syria voted in the elections.
More than 90% of registered Iraqi voters voted in Syria. This is a high percentage and will surely bring Iraqis to a new juncture, despite the fact that it is not a high number compared to all the Iraqis residing in Syria.
Now we are making an accurate voting count, although it might be slow. More than 90% voted. Yesterday and the day before, they headed to the voting booth and gave their votes.
According to knowledgeable sources, members of the Iraqi Ba'ath Party from Fallujah had voted at the election center in the Maza area in Damascus. In any case, the results of the vote tally, which began at a secret area in the suburbs of Damascus for security reasons, will be sent on February 5th to Amman, where Iraqi votes from abroad will be collected.
Why Amman?
Why Amman? Because the Higher Election Commission ordered that all votes from around the world be tailed to Amman. Here we will count and tally the votes.
Then the Higher Elections Commission will receive the results and will make a final announcement on the results from Iraq.
The final results will be announced by the Higher Electoral Commission in Baghdad. They will send the results through the internet to secure site.
According to a knowledgeable source, the United Iraqi Alliance List, the Iraqi List, the Land of the Two Rivers, and the Kurdistan Democratic Front received the votes of Iraqis residing in Syria. Meanwhile, in Iraq, the Turkoman Alliance Front warned against playing with the results in Kirkuk.
The election will achieve a good, independent future as long as the government, whether the President of the Republic or the Prime Minister or any national government, views the various Iraqi segments of population, the Sunnis, the Shiites and the Turkmens, equally, and not exclude any of the basic segments of the population, because the Turkmens must be part of the political process. If one voice is silenced, then it will lead to the deterioration of the political process.
The Syrian government's cooperation with the International Organization for Migration to allow the elections to succeed may ease the tension in Syrian-Iraqi relations, which reached to the point that there were hints that violence might be spread to the streets of Damascus. Meanwhile, the return of 500,000 Iraqis residing in Syria creates an economic and security burden on Syria.
A
group of foreign election experts in charge of supervising the Iraqi elections released their initial evaluations, saying that these elections are in compliance with international standards. The chairman of the Expediency Discernment Council of the system in Iran, Hashemi Rafsanjani, said the Americans may create fraudulent election results or carry out a coup if the results are not satisfactory to them. Regardless of the result of the elections, they are making a new page in the history of the country. They are paving the way for the departure of the American forces, even if it doesn't happen for a long time.
خروج قوات الاحتلال عن أرض العراق ولو بعد حين.
مستقبل العراق بعد إجراء الانتخابات تغلب على
The future of Iraq after the elections is more important than the future of any Iraqi ethnic group in particular. Despite the fact that violence has claimed the lives of some Iraqis who came to the election centers, their persistence and defiance to all terrorist threats of bloodshed have prevailed over the sound of explosions.
صوت انتصاره على دوي التفجيرات.
Foreign experts said that the elections are successful and in compliance with international standards, confirming that the turnout was larger than those in some prominent democratic countries.
The second ballot box has been closed.
Even before announcing the results of the elections, some say that these elections represent the end of the Saddam era and the Ba'athist regime, the end of all dictatorships that controlled the future of Iraq for long periods of time.
I can tell you good news. Freedom has prevailed and we have defeated terrorism.
Some observers believe that the Iraqi people have shown courage by going to the election booths, which shows that they have a strong determination to be responsible for the future of their country. This was seen in the large waves of voters who defied terrorists by insisting on their right to vote. This clearly shows that the terrorist organizations have been eliminated, or at least weakened. If these organizations should continue with their violent acts, it will become clear for the Iraqis that these organizations are only causing destruction.
المراقبون يقرؤون كذلك أن آثار هذه الانتخابات.
Political observers say that the effects of these elections will go beyond Iraq. The former Iranian president Hashemi Rafsanjani, who warned the Americans not to create fraudulent election results, said that these elections will have a strong influence on Arab countries because Iraq is also an Arab country. Some have cast doubt on the ability of the Iraqis to vote freely amidst terrorist threats, election boycotts, and fraud by the occupation forces. However, all these doubts failed when confronted with the will of the Iraqis. They have gained some level of freedom by responding to the election campaigns, which stressed the need for every Iraqi to have a voice. The high turnout is a loud scream that muted the sound of explosions, even those that shook some of the election centers.
As Iraqis await their landmark vote results, Iraq's interim Prime Minister Iyad Allawi vowed to unite the country's competing ethnic and religious groups a day after millions of voters cast their ballots. The call was an attempt to seize the momentum created by yesterday's poll when electoral officials estimate around 8 million Iraqi turned out to vote. Across much of Iraq, there was a sense of accomplishment after the vote, with many people displaying index fingers stained with purple polling ink, proud to have braved insurgent threats against the first multi-party poll in 50 years. Worldwide leading Iraq war components France, Germany and Russia hailed elections in the country as a first step on the road to democracy and pledged to back U.S. efforts to restore stability. More with Dana Abu Sham.
Iraqis in their homeland celebrated yesterday's elections in various cities and towns. Iraq's Electoral Commission said vote counting was going well, but it would take up to 10 days for an official final tally to emerge. It could take weeks to form a government. However, Iraqis were jubilant. In Basra, Iraqi police sang and danced with some of the British soldiers. Basra residents were in a positive mood. This man described the elections as successful and democratic. The world's reaction to this historic moment in Iraq was all positive. Government spokeswoman Asma Khadr welcomed the elections as a step in the right direction.
We do believe that it was a good step further, and we hope that the future will reflect the interest of involving and representing all the Iraqi people, despite of how much they were able to participate or not in the elections. And also we hope that this step will lead to the peaceful life and the rebuilding the institutions, political institutions of Iraq.
Following a meeting in Ankara with the Turkish Foreign Minister, U.S. Undersecretary of Defense for Policy Douglas Feith said it was an important day and a great accomplishment.
The United States strongly believes that it is crucial that the territorial integrity of Iraq be preserved, and that the unity of the country be preserved, and that problems like Kirkuk be solved in a way that reinforces the unity and territorial integrity of the country.
Russian President Vladimir Putin praised the elections as a step in the right direction and told ministers at a government session to work for Iraq's future stability. Despite their concerns over the low turnout among minority Sunnis in Iraq, Russia, France, Germany and European Union officials joined Washington in declaring the poll a success. EU Commission President José Manuel Barroso said it was a great day for democracy and for freedom.
It was a great day for the men and women of Iraq that have the opportunity to vote. I congratulate them for their courage. It was also a very powerful signal for the region, for all the world, for all of those that in the world are fighting for democracy, for freedom. Those are the European values, and we are very happy of seeing this result.
France, which incurred U.S. wrath for leading opposition around the world to the 2003 war on Iraq, called the elections a first victory for democracy in Iraq, but warned there was still much to do. In a greater than expected turnout, up to 8 million Iraqis defied the violence of insurgents to cast their ballots yesterday in Iraq's first multi-party vote in half a century. Not even threats deterred them in determining their future. Once all votes in the Iraqi election are counted, a 275-member National Assembly will be formed, its seats allocated by the share of votes gained by each competing bloc. The National Assembly will draw up a draft constitution for Iraq by August 15th of this year. This draft constitution must then be put to the Iraqi people for approval in a referendum. If it is approved, a general election will be held by December 15th of this year, and a new government will be installed by the end of the year. If the constitution is rejected, the National Assembly will be dissolved, and an election for a new one will take place by December 15, 2005. Dana Abu Sham for Jordan Television.
On the ground, most of the Iraq streets were quiet and empty one day after the country's polls. However, 3 U.S. Marines were killed and 2 others wounded during a military operation in Babel, south of Baghdad. Another 2 U.S. Marines were killed in action in the volatile Anbar province, west of Baghdad, late last night. Earlier, and in a videotape, the Mujahideen militant group said it had fired a guided anti-armor missile at the British C-130 Hercules plane as it was flying at a low altitude yesterday west of Baghdad. The video also showed an explosion at a distance and what appeared to be the debris of a plane on the ground. Up to 15 British military personnel were killed when the giant transport plane crashed near Baghdad in what defense experts fear was a ground-to-air attack by insurgents. Another video was released by the U.S. Army showing a rocket hitting the U.S. Embassy compound in Baghdad's fortified Green Zone, killing 2 and wounding 4 on Saturday. The rocket struck shortly after dark on the eve of Iraq's watershed election, causing an explosion heard across Baghdad. Kuwaiti security forces killed 5 al-Qaeda militants and captured 4 others, including a top leader, during clashes in Kuwait, battling for the second day a surge in al-Qaeda-linked violence. An Interior Ministry spokesman said several policemen were killed and 5 were wounded, 1 critically, in the clashes. 1 civilian was also killed in the clash, the 4th this month, pitting al-Qaeda militants and police in Kuwait. Today's gun battle marked an escalation in the fight between authorities and militants bent on destabilizing the country. Security sources said police were still pursuing about 11 militants in the wealthy neighborhood of Mubarak al-Kabir. Residents said heavy gunfire dotted with mortar blast was heard for 2 hours. Police blocked all entry to the area and security reinforcements were brought in to the scene.
Iraq's first free election in half a century has been hailed a success, a step that could move the country to stability. Election workers counted ballots after some 8 million Iraqis voted across the country Sunday. Muhalil Fakir has a story.
Many Iraqis defied the climate of fear to queue at polling stations in numbers that surprised even the Iraqi authorities. The Independent Election Commission said the turnout had exceeded expectations. A top commission official said the final percentage could be between 60 and 75%. Foreign observers also stressed there had been a strong turnout. Election workers counted votes late into the night, often by candlelight or with lanterns as power cuts hindered their task. The final result may take more than a week to be announced. Iraq's interim Prime Minister Iyad al-Allawi, who is expected to play a lead role in the next government, hailed the election for a 275-member assembly to draw up a new constitution and lay the new groundwork for a post-Saddam future. The majority Shiite community and Kurds concentrated in the north had been expected to vote in high numbers. Kurds, who make up nearly a fifth of Iraqis, are looking to the vote to enshrine their autonomous rule. But many Sunnis in the northern part of Iraq stayed home. In Fallujah, a slow stream of people turned out, confounding expectations. Iraq's crunchy election was marred by irregularities and low turnout in Mosul, despite insistence from the U.S. military that voting in the restive northern capital passed off smoothly. Kurdish and Christian politicians charged that thousands were unable to vote in Nineveh province because of a lack of ballot papers, sparking riots in one town north of Mosul. The election could see the majority Shiite community take control of the government in an Arab country for the first time in 11 centuries, and Shiite and Sunni political parties face weeks of wrangling with Kurdish and secular rivals over the makeup of the new government. The alliance has the backing of Grand Ayatollah Ali al-Sistani, the Shiite spiritual leader, and is expected to be the biggest single bloc. The International Organization for Migration said among Iraqi expatriates, at least 90% of registered voters cast their ballots. The vote was only the first step on Iraq's road to self-rule and stability. Once results are in, it could take weeks to backroom deals before the new assembly picks a prime minister and government. If that government proves successful by drawing in the Sunnis, who partly shunned the election, the country could stabilize, hastening the day when 150,000 U.S. troops leave Iraq.
Iraq's interim government said 7 foreign nationals were arrested while attacking polling centers on Iraq's election day. Earlier, an interior ministry source said a Chechen and a Syrian were among the attackers on a day that saw around 38 people killed in suicide bombings and mortar strikes. Insurgents breached a huge security clampdown to stage suicide bombing attacks and hit polling stations with mortars. There was also the crash of a British Royal Air Force transport plane that killed around 10 military personnel.
The number of British dead in the latest plane crash was not immediately clear. Defense sources cited by Britain's Press Association said the toll was around 10. Insurgents who vowed to turn Election Day into a bloodbath killed 30 civilians and 6 police, while 2 American soldiers were killed in the western province of Al-Anbar. About 9 suicide bombers were also killed. Tens of thousands of Iraqi and mainly U.S. foreign troops were on the streets to counter threats by Al-Qaeda frontman Abu al-Mus'ab al-Zarqawi, whose group claimed to have spoiled the party with suicide attacks. The government-sealed frontiers closed Baghdad airport and imposed a nighttime curfew during the poll. Vehicle traffic near polling stations was also banned. In one of the deadliest attacks, a bomber wearing an explosives-packed belt killed 7 civilians and 2 policemen outside a polling station. A bomb also tore apart a bus of Sunnis being ferried to a station south of Baghdad, killing 5. The military said an Iraqi soldier accidentally killed a civilian, and the voter was wounded by sniper fire. With rebels threatening a long war, Washington and the interim Iraqi government have refused to set a timetable for the withdrawal of foreign forces. But Iraq's interim Interior Minister, Falah al-Naqib, said U.S. and British troops would not be needed anymore in as soon as 18 months from now.
U.S. President George W. Bush and British Prime Minister Tony Blair both hailed the elections as a resounding success. Bush, who ordered the invasion in an alleged attempt to topple Saddam Hussein in March 2003, called the vote a great and historic achievement, but cautioned that more hard work remained in the war-weary state. Blair said the election was a blow right to the heart of the global terrorism. For his part, European Union Foreign Policy Chief Javier Solana congratulated the Iraqi people and stressed, despite the many difficulties that lie ahead, the election marked progress towards a transition to a democratic, free and peaceful Iraq. UN Secretary General Kofi Annan appealed to the Iraqis for reconciliation following the vote. He stressed preliminary indications showed the elections had been successful. Annan also assured Iraq of further UN help in drawing up a constitution, a process which he said must include all those who were unable or unwilling to cast a ballot.
This is a remarkable day for the Iraqi people, that across the country, despite the intimidation, despite the threats of Zarqawi, who literally took on democracy directly, that the Iraqi people are turning out in large numbers to vote, that they are jubilant at this opportunity to vote. This is the start of a new day for Iraq. It's not perfect. There are parts of the country where people have been intimidated and where the violence is very high. We always knew that that would be the case, but the Iraqis have taken a huge step forward, and they have hard work ahead of them, but this is a great day for the Iraqi people.
The views expressed on Mosaic are not those of Link TV or its sponsors, but of the broadcasters themselves. Mosaic is made possible by a grant from the John S. and James L. Knight Foundation, which promotes journalism excellence worldwide and invests in the vitality of 26 U.S. communities, and the William and Flora Hewlett Foundation. Additional support is provided by the Firedoll Foundation and Henry and Virgilia Dakin.